They called me in tears, said there'd been an emergency, a terrible accident. Time was running out, and they needed help, fast. So I did what any mother would do. I trusted them. I signed the papers they sent, thinking I was saving my family. But there was no emergency, no accident, just a plan, a cold, calculated plan, to take the house my parents left me, the house they grew up in, the house I built my life in, and they nearly got away with it, until I found out the truth. If you've ever felt betrayed by the very people you raised, you're not alone. This story might stir up some anger, or maybe recognition. So before we go further, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, what would you have done? My name is Eleanor Whitley, and I've lived in the same house for nearly 5 decades. It's not just a house, it's the house. The one my grandfather built with his bare hands after returning from the war. The one where my mother taught me how to bake cornbread and where I raised 3 children, Brian, Melissa, and Jordan, after my husband passed away when they were still little. It's a 2-story Victorian tucked away on a quiet street in Savannah. Wraparound porch, creaky wood floors, roses I planted when I was 32 still blooming in the front yard. Every corner, every scratch on the wall tells a story. It's not just a home, it's a living memory. After retirement, I stayed busy. I taught quilting at the community center, hosted Bible study on Thursdays, and sometimes volunteered at the library. My body slowed down, sure, arthritis in my knees, and sometimes I'd forget names, but my mind, sharp as ever. Still, my kids worried. At first, it felt sweet. Brian dropping by to mow the lawn, Melissa bringing me groceries, Jordan checking in with long-winded phone calls about Medicare scams and elder safety. But slowly, their tone shifted. Mom, this place is too much for you. You should be somewhere safer with support, like a retirement village. Wouldn't it be nice not to have to worry about maintenance and all that? They started leaving brochures around. At first, I brushed it off as concern. But then came the financial talks. Brian, the eldest and a real estate agent, ran the numbers. Mom, if you sold this place, you could live comfortably, no stress, and if anything happens, you'll already be in the right facility. Melissa chimed in with her favorite line, "It's about quality of life, Mom." Jordan, the youngest and most charming of the bunch, just looked at me with those puppy dog eyes and said, "We only want what's best for you." I'll admit, there were moments I considered it. There were days the stairs felt like Everest, nights when the house felt too quiet, too hollow. But every time I walked past the photo wall in the hallway, birthdays, first steps, my late husband in uniform, I knew. This house is my anchor. Still, the pressure persisted, subtle at first, then heavier. Melissa brought up a friend whose mother had a fall in her old house. Brian warned me about declining home values. Jordan even tried showing me virtual tours of senior communities on his phone, acting like it was just a fun little game. I didn't want to fight. I just smiled, thanked them, and quietly kept things the way they were. Until one morning in late April. It was just after sunrise when my phone rang. Melissa, sobbing. "Mom, it's Jordan. He was in a car accident. He's okay, but the hospital bills. He doesn't have insurance, and they won't do surgery unless we pay up front." My heart dropped. Then Brian got on the line, his voice grave. "Mom, we've pooled together everything we have, but we're short, and it's urgent." They sent over documents, just temporary power of attorney, they said, so I could help move some funds. I didn't understand all the legal terms, but Melissa insisted, "Just sign where I highlighted. You're just helping, Mom. You're saving your baby." I signed. I signed because I trusted them, because I loved them, because in that moment I believed every trembling word that came out of their mouths. They picked me up later that afternoon. Brian said they'd made arrangements for me to stay at a lovely assisted living home just while Jordan recovered. Said I'd be more comfortable there, with meals and help and people to talk to. I was too shaken to argue. I packed a few things. Just for a week, I thought. The place was clean, the staff was polite, but it wasn't my home. I kept asking about Jordan. How was he doing? Was he awake? When could I see him? Oh, he's resting, Mom. Soon. Don't worry, we've got it under control. Just focus on settling in. The days passed. No word from Jordan, no updates. And when I asked to go home, Brian always had an excuse. They're doing repairs, Mom. There was a plumbing issue. Just hang tight. One morning I wandered down to the computer room at the facility. A younger resident helped me look up real estate listings, just for fun, she said. And there it was. My house, listed online, open house scheduled, gorgeous photos, asking price nearly double what I'd ever imagined. My blood ran cold. At first I refused to believe it. There had to be some mistake. Maybe the listing was old. Maybe the realtor, whoever posted it, got the address wrong. That happens, right? But the photos didn't lie. There was my rose garden, trimmed back too far. There was the kitchen, my kitchen, with the chipped blue tile and the rooster clock I'd bought in 1979 still hanging on the wall. There was my bedroom, now empty, but unmistakably mine. I clicked on the agent's contact link, and guess who the listing agent was? Brian Whitley, my son. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. I couldn't catch my breath. My hands trembled as I closed the browser window. The sweet girl who had helped me use the computer asked if I was okay. I smiled, lied, said I just needed to sit down for a moment. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the narrow bed in that sterile room with its fake plants and beige curtains, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together how I got here. The documents, the emergency, Jordan's accident. Had it all been a lie? I called Jordan the next morning. No answer. Straight to voicemail. Melissa too. Then Brian. Nothing. I waited 2 more days before they finally visited. Melissa and Brian, all smiles and fake warmth. Mom, how are you settling in? Melissa asked, breezing in with a store-bought flower bouquet and too much perfume. I didn't hug her. I didn't smile. I asked one question. Where is Jordan? They froze. Brian spoke first. He's better, at home resting. He didn't want to worry you. I stared at them in silence, my heart pounding. Then I pulled out the printed listing I had asked the front desk to help me get. You listed my house. Brian looked down, jaw tightening. Melissa took a breath. Mom, you signed the papers. You agreed. We talked about this. No, you told me Jordan was dying. You lied to me so I would sign over power of attorney. That's fraud. Melissa's voice hardened. It's not fraud. It's care. We're doing what's best for you. You can't live alone anymore. You've said it yourself. I said I was tired. I didn't say I was done, Brian snapped. Mom, that house is a liability. Do you have any idea what it's worth right now? We're trying to secure your future. You didn't plan for retirement, and now we're doing the hard work. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own children, talking to me like a burden, like an obstacle. They left soon after, but not before Brian said something that cut deep. You should be grateful, Mom. You've had a good run in that house. That evening I sat in the rec room with a pad of paper and a pen. I made a list. Get a lawyer, revoke power of attorney, find out if sale is finalized, call Jordan directly, again. And that night, I cried. Not because I was confused or hurt, though I was both, but because I realized something no mother wants to admit. My children didn't just betray me. They planned it. I remembered little things that hadn't made sense before. Melissa once mentioned needing a bigger house now that her daughter was starting school. Brian had casually asked about the deed, the mortgage details. Jordan had asked about any valuables I wanted to safeguard in case of burglary. They weren't helping. They were evaluating, like vultures circling an old, tired animal. The next day, I called my old friend and neighbor Louise. She was in her 70s, but she still played bridge like a shark and had more fire in her than most women half her age. When I told her what happened, she was furious. "Eleanor, you need to call Walter. Remember him? That hotshot elder law attorney who helped Ruth when her son tried to take her car and sell it for crypto?" I did remember Walter. He was expensive, but sharp. Louise made the call for me, and 2 days later, Walter showed up at the home. He came with a notebook, a stern face, and a no-nonsense tone that made the staff suddenly very accommodating. I gave him everything: the documents I had signed, the listing, the names, the dates. He looked through it all and said, "Mrs. Whitley, I believe your children committed financial exploitation and misused their power of attorney. But we need to act fast. If the house sale closes, it gets a lot harder." "What can we do?" I asked, gripping the arms of my chair. "We're going to freeze the transaction, file an injunction, and we're going to court." It felt like jumping off a cliff, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something return, something I thought I had lost in that room, in those lies. Fight. I wasn't a helpless old woman. I was Eleanor Whitley, daughter of John Whitley, wife of William Whitley, mother of 3, and survivor of much worse than betrayal. If my children wanted a war over my house, then by God, I was going to give them one. Walter moved quickly. Within 48 hours, he filed a motion with the county court to temporarily freeze the property transaction. The listing was still active, which gave us an edge. As long as it hadn't closed, we had a fighting chance. "First," Walter said, "we're revoking the power of attorney. You're competent and independent, and we'll get a doctor's evaluation to prove it." He arranged for a geriatric specialist to assess me. The doctor, a kind woman with bright eyes and no nonsense in her tone, ran me through memory tests, orientation checks, and decision-making scenarios. After an hour, she put down her pen. "Mrs. Whitley, you're sharper than most of my 30-year-old patients. You've been manipulated, not confused." That report became Exhibit A. Next, Walter contacted Brian's broker's office. As it turned out, listing your own mother's house while holding power of attorney was already raising a few eyebrows, especially when the client hadn't been heard from since. The brokerage suspended the listing pending investigation. Then we drafted a letter. Not to my children, but to the buyers. Walter explained it this way: "They're innocent. They may have no idea this is even a mess. If we can scare them off with the threat of legal entanglement, it weakens your kid's position. No buyer, no sale." So we sent a formal notice through their real estate agent stating that the property was under dispute and that the owner, me, was contesting the transaction as fraudulent. The next step was personal. I called Jordan, again. This time he answered. "Mom?" His voice sounded guilty and small. "Are you in the hospital, Jordan?" "No, I never said I was. It was just," Melissa said. "She thought if you knew we were in trouble financially, you'd help faster. You lied. I didn't want to, but Brian said if we didn't act now, someone else would buy the house. You weren't going to sell, and we needed the money, Mom. Melissa's got medical bills. Brian's in debt. I'm sorry." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just listened, and then said, "I've hired a lawyer. We're going to court." Silence. Then, "Mom, please, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. And Jordan, don't call me again unless it's through legal counsel." I hung up. Walter looked at me across the table, eyebrows raised. "Nicely done." "Cold enough?" I asked. He smirked. "Frostbite." Walter moved fast, faster than I thought any lawyer would. He didn't waste time with pleasantries or sugarcoating. Within 24 hours, he filed for an emergency injunction with the county court to halt the sale of the house. The judge granted a temporary freeze until the situation could be investigated. I hadn't even told the kids yet. Walter said, "Let them find out when the buyer's agent calls to scream at Brian." It was the first time I smiled in weeks. We scheduled a formal appointment to revoke the power of attorney. Walter had me sign a new directive, this time assigning him as my legal representative until the matter was resolved. I asked him, "Is this going to be ugly?" He didn't blink. "It's already ugly. Now we make it legal." The next step? Digging. Walter had a young paralegal named Rena, sharp as a tack and tech-savvy as hell. She began going through my financials, tracing anything that had been moved or sold without my full consent. What they found made my stomach turn. Brian had arranged an advance payment from the prospective buyers, essentially a hold deposit on the house. He hadn't put it in a joint account or into escrow. No, he'd put it in his own business account. Melissa had made charges on my credit card. Nothing outrageous, but enough to raise flags. Spa treatments, home office supplies, and a strange $900 charge from a private catering service. And Jordan? He hadn't been in any accident. He was in Tampa, on vacation. A friend of Rena's pulled up his public Instagram account. He had posted a picture just days before, drink in hand, beach in the background, with the caption, "Sun's out, stress gone." The comments under the post were worse. Melissa, "Live it up while mom's tucked away." Brian, "She'll thank us later." I was shaking when I saw that, not because of what they said, but because of what it meant. They didn't just lie to me, they celebrated it. Walter printed the screenshots, added them to the case file. He looked at me and said, "We're not just fighting for your house anymore. We're fighting for your dignity." That weekend, I left the assisted living facility for good. Walter arranged for me to stay at a short-term rental across town, a modest apartment but quiet and clean. Louise helped me pack what little I had at the facility. She didn't say much, but I saw the look in her eyes, pride and rage. I called Jordan from the new apartment. This time, he picked up. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" "Just peachy," I said calmly. "By the way, I saw your beach photos." There was silence on the line. "I also froze the sale of my house and revoked the power of attorney you all manipulated me into signing." Jordan stammered. "Mom, wait, it wasn't like that. Brian said—" "I know exactly what Brian said, and I saw exactly what you posted." Then I hung up. Walter began prepping the legal motion for full revocation of the sale agreement. The buyers, some wealthy couple from out of state, were furious and threatened to sue for breach of contract. But Walter knew their agent had failed to ensure that the sale was ethically sound. He wasn't worried. Meanwhile, I started gathering my own kind of ammunition. Letters, cards, old emails, anything that proved my children had been involved in long-term manipulation. Louise helped me go through the attic boxes she'd been storing for me, things I never thought I'd need again. And then, I made a decision. I went to the bank and updated my will. Removed all 3 of them. Instead, I listed 2 beneficiaries, a local women's shelter I had once volunteered with, and Louise. It wasn't revenge, it was correction. They took my trust and twisted it into leverage. They tried to erase me. So I did the only thing left. I started writing myself back into the story. The phone calls started within days. Brian was the first. Furious. "What the hell are you doing, Mom? Do you have any idea how much trouble you're causing?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. "Brian, the only trouble here is the one you created when you lied to me." He launched into a tirade about contracts, about money already spent, about his reputation as a real estate professional. I let him finish. Then I said, "I suggest you hire a lawyer. Mine's already 10 steps ahead." Click. Next came Melissa. She was the smooth one, always trying to spin things her way. She showed up at my rental uninvited, dressed in fake humility and holding a casserole dish like it was 1955. "Mom," she sighed, "we didn't mean to hurt you. We just wanted what was best. You were getting forgetful. Don't you remember that time you left the oven on?" I looked her dead in the eye. "That oven incident? I remember perfectly. I turned it back off before I left. You're mistaking selective memory for senility." She blinked. I went on. "You manipulated me. All of you. And now you're caught." She tried to cry. I didn't offer her a tissue. She left with the untouched casserole still in hand. But the worst came a week later, when the court date was officially scheduled. That's when they turned ugly. All three of them filed a joint petition claiming I was mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. They submitted statements accusing me of delusional behavior, hoarding, and erratic mood swings. Melissa even included photos of my cluttered sewing room as evidence of cognitive decline. Walter was ready. He filed a countermotion and demanded a full psychological evaluation from a state-certified geriatric psychiatrist. The court agreed. I went into that evaluation with my shoulders back and head high, answered every question with clarity, even joked a little, just enough to show I still had a sense of humor. The doctor told me afterward, "You're not just competent, you're sharper than most of my clients in their 50s. The report was submitted to the court within 48 hours. My kid's petition was immediately denied. The judge issued a warning against further attempts to question my mental fitness without basis. That was the first real blow. But the second came when Walter subpoenaed Jordan's bank and travel records. We proved, undeniably, that there had been no emergency, no accident, no surgery. Instead, there were flight tickets to Tampa, receipts from beachfront hotels, and Uber charges to bars and nightclubs. Walter attached every page to our case brief. The courtroom was silent as they were read out. Brian looked pale. Melissa refused to meet my eyes. Jordan didn't even show up. But what turned the tide completely was Louise. Walter called her as a witness. She told the judge about the phone calls she overheard, the strange behavior, and how she had been the one to help me dig into the truth. She was poised, honest, and fiercely loyal. When she finished, the judge nodded with solemn respect. Then came my turn. I stood, hands steady, and told my story. How I had believed I was saving my son's life. How I trusted my children to honor the bond we shared. How they used that trust to isolate me, extract my assets, and discard me like an old coat. And how I fought back. The judge didn't say much that day. He didn't have to. His ruling spoke for itself. Sale of the house permanently voided due to fraudulent consent. Full revocation of all financial control from my children. A formal investigation into possible elder abuse charges. As we walked out of the courthouse, Walter turned to me and said, "That was textbook justice." But to me, it wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming who I was. Not a burden, not a confused old woman, but a mother, a homeowner, and a woman who refused to be erased. And the battle? It was just beginning. If you've ever been underestimated, by your own blood, this story probably hits hard. Eleanor didn't just survive her children's betrayal. She turned the tables. If you're still watching, drop a comment below. When is standing up to family not only right, but necessary? And don't forget to like and subscribe. After the court's decision to void the sale and revoke my children's financial control, there was a brief, eerie silence. No calls, no visits, just silence. For a moment, I thought they might slink away, ashamed, and leave me to rebuild my life in peace. I was wrong. A week later, I received a letter, delivered by hand. Not from Brian, Melissa, or Jordan, but from their attorney. A cease and desist notice. Apparently, my public statements, specifically the court testimony, had damaged their reputations and professional opportunities. They were considering a defamation suit. Defamation? For telling the truth? Walter read the letter, snorted, and said, "Empty threat, classic bluff. But now we know they're not done." That was the moment I realized. They weren't backing off. They were regrouping. Walter suggested we go further. "Let's put it all in writing, a full affidavit detailing what happened in your own words. And let's prepare for a civil countersuit. Emotional damages, financial fraud, elder coercion." I agreed. But I also wanted something more, something deeper than legal vengeance. I wanted people to know. So, with Walter's help, I arranged a community meeting at the local library. Nothing dramatic, just a senior rights awareness forum. We invited residents, social workers, even some real estate professionals. Louise spoke first, sharing stories of friends who had been pressured into leaving their homes. Then I stood before the crowd. I didn't name my children directly, I didn't have to. But I told my story, truthfully, painfully, and without shame. The reactions were overwhelming. Women and men came up afterward with tears in their eyes. Some shared their own stories. Some just hugged me. That night, I received a message on Facebook from one of Brian's former colleagues. "Wanted to say thank you for speaking out. I always suspected he cut corners with clients. Your courage might help more people than you know." The cracks were widening. Later that week, Melissa's husband, who had kept quiet through the whole ordeal, called me. "I'm sorry," he said. "I had no idea what she and the others were doing. I didn't agree with it, but I stayed out of it. I guess I was afraid." I thanked him for the honesty. He paused before hanging up. "They're unraveling, Eleanor. You should know that. They're turning on each other." And they were. Louise called me one morning in a breathless whisper. "Turn on the radio, local talk show, right now." I did. And there it was, Brian's voice. He was calling into a live segment about elder fraud, not as a victim, but in defense of himself. "She agreed to everything," he insisted. "People love to twist things when they regret their decisions. I've worked hard my whole life. Why shouldn't I help my mother move on to something more practical?" The host didn't buy it. Neither did the callers. They tore into him. "She's your mother," one caller snapped. "Not a property deal." Another, "You should be ashamed." That call went viral. Local news picked it up. The community that once admired my children's success began to whisper, question, and distance themselves. They thought they could manipulate me and walk away untouched. But the truth? It has a way of echoing louder than any lie. The courtroom was packed. Eleanor sat at the plaintiff's table, composed in a charcoal gray blazer, her green eyes steady and unyielding. On the other side sat her children, Ben fidgeting, Claire with her lips pursed in faux sorrow, and Josh looking everywhere but at her. None of them could meet her gaze. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with a sharp expression, called the room to order. Eleanor's attorney stood. "Your Honor, we are here to present evidence that my client, Mrs. Eleanor Bryant, was misled into signing over power of attorney under false pretenses, resulting in the unauthorized sale of her ancestral home." The opposing counsel objected. Mrs. Bryant's children acted out of concern for her well-being. There was no fraud. But Eleanor's lawyer calmly presented a stack of printed text messages between Ben, Claire, and Josh, discussing how they would create an emergency to get their mother to sign the papers. The phrase, "Once she signs, we list it. She won't fight it if we frame it like it's for her health," drew audible gasps from the courtroom. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Counselor, your clients orchestrated a lie to extract power of attorney?" "They were worried she wasn't thinking clearly," the defense insisted. "I was never confused," Eleanor finally spoke, her voice calm but resonant. "I was betrayed. By my own children. They used my trust as a weapon." Josh stood abruptly. "We were trying to protect you." Eleanor turned to face him. "Then why didn't you visit once I was in that nursing home? Why did you list my house behind my back? You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your own bank accounts." Claire started to cry. Ben stared into his lap. Eleanor's lawyer continued. Your Honor, we also have a statement from the nursing facility where Mrs. Bryant was placed without her consent, describing her as lucid, articulate, and fully independent. The judge nodded. That aligns with her in-court demeanor. For the first time, the weight of what they'd done seemed to settle on the children's shoulders. The judge took a deep breath. The court finds sufficient evidence of manipulation and breach of fiduciary duty. The power of attorney was obtained through deceit. I'm ordering the reversal of the property sale process and an immediate reinstatement of Mrs. Bryant's full legal autonomy. Claire let out a sharp gasp. Josh swore under his breath. Ben just whispered, She's serious. Eleanor didn't smile. There was no triumph in her eyes, only a quiet relief, like the sun cracking through a storm cloud. She gathered her things, stood tall, and gave her children one last look. I raised you better, she said softly, but I won't carry your shame anymore. And with that, she walked out, not with anger, but with dignity. Eleanor stood alone in her living room, barefoot on the hardwood floor her father had installed decades ago. The house had never felt so quiet, yet so fully hers. The courtroom battle was over. The judge's gavel had come down with a finality that echoed louder than the lies her children had told. The house was back in her name. The sale was nullified, and the power of attorney, weaponized against her, had been permanently revoked. There were no celebration balloons, no cheers, no family to embrace. But there was peace. For the first time in months, Eleanor could breathe without fear that someone else was making decisions behind her back. The woman who had once trusted her children with everything now trusted herself above all. That afternoon, she met with her estate lawyer, not to dwell on the past, but to rewrite her future. Her voice didn't tremble this time. She was clear and resolute. All financial access previously granted to her children was to be terminated immediately. The joint accounts were closed. Credit cards issued in her name were canceled and reissued under her sole authority. From now on, Eleanor would hold the reins of her own affairs. Then came the hardest decision of all, the will. For years, it had named her children as equal beneficiaries of the family home and savings. But sitting in that leather chair across from her lawyer, she knew the damage couldn't be undone by kind words or hopeful thinking. Trust was a fragile thread, and they had torn it. I want to revise everything, she said firmly. If I pass, the house goes to charity, preferably one that helps elderly people protect themselves from family exploitation. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. Are you sure, Eleanor? That's a big step. I'm sure, she said. This house was supposed to be a legacy. They tried to turn it into a payday. Let it help people who truly need shelter, not ones who fake emergencies to steal it. Word spread quickly. Within days, she received frantic calls from Rachel, then Stephen, then Grant. Messages layered with guilt, disbelief, and desperate apologies. Mom, we didn't mean for it to go this far. You're overreacting. Can't we talk? But Eleanor didn't answer. Not this time. Instead, she poured herself a cup of black coffee, opened the back door, and stepped into her overgrown garden. She hadn't tended it in months. Now, among the tangled vines and weeds, she spotted the first stubborn bloom of late summer, an old rose bush still flowering against the odds. She smiled. She was 74, alone, and finally free. Tomorrow, the local nonprofit she'd chosen would be coming over to photograph the house for a future donation profile. She'd also volunteered to speak at one of their elder protection seminars, sharing her story not as a victim, but as a warning. Because what her children tried to steal wasn't just a house, it was her dignity, her autonomy, and she'd taken it back. In the months following the court's ruling, Eleanor began to rebuild her life, not just practically, but emotionally. Her house, once stripped of furniture and warmth, slowly transformed back into the home she had always known. With the help of kind neighbors and a few church friends, she restored each room with care. Every framed photo, every handmade quilt, every piece of old china reclaimed from storage felt like a small victory. But the silence was different now. It was no longer the hollow quiet of abandonment, but the calm of clarity. Eleanor no longer held her breath waiting for her children to visit. She no longer felt the need to defend herself or question whether she had failed as a mother. That weight had been lifted the moment she stood up for herself in court. She began seeing a therapist from a senior advocacy group, something she'd once considered unnecessary. But those quiet weekly sessions became a balm for her soul. For the first time in her life, she was allowed to grieve, not just the betrayal, but the illusion of the family she thought she had. Eleanor also found purpose. After revising her will to leave her estate to a nonprofit focused on elder legal aid, she began volunteering with the same organization. She attended seminars, shared her story, and helped others recognize the warning signs of financial abuse. Her voice, once soft and unsure, grew steady and clear. One afternoon, a younger woman approached her after a community talk. Tearfully, she thanked Eleanor for speaking up. Her own mother had just been manipulated in a similar way. Eleanor embraced her, realizing that her pain had become someone else's compass. As autumn rolled in, Eleanor planted a new garden in her backyard. She chose lavender, rosemary, and wild daisies, plants that were hardy, fragrant, and slow to bloom. Like me, she mused. Each morning she sat with her coffee on the back porch, no longer afraid of solitude. In that stillness, she found peace. Though her children occasionally tried to reach out, through generic cards, short emails, and once, a voicemail laced with guilt, Eleanor didn't respond. Not out of spite, but from a place of resolve. She had forgiven them in her own way, but forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. Some boundaries, once drawn, must remain to keep the soul safe. One evening, as the wind rustled through her freshly bloomed rosemary, Eleanor picked up her pen and began to write. Not to her children, but to herself. A letter of closure, a testament to the woman she had become. Not just a mother or a widow, but a survivor, a fighter, a protector of her own dignity. And though she knew time would not erase the betrayal, she also knew this. She had chosen herself, and that choice finally was enough.